The tranquility of the countryside. Many seek it as a refuge, an escape from the chaos of the city. But believe me, behind the bucolic beauty and the apparent peace, unimaginable horrors can lie hidden. Horrors that the city, with all its noise and lights, would never dare to harbor. Today, I bring you three true accounts that prove that the purest and most visceral fear can flourish where it is least expected, in the heart of the countryside. Have you ever felt completely isolated? Not just physically, but isolated from any help, from any witness to the inexplicable? The stories that follow share this claustrophobic sense of solitude, where terror becomes an unwelcome and persistent guest. Prepare yourself, because after hearing them, the next time you find yourself alone on a dark, rural road, your perception of the night will never be the same. My name is Lucas, and this story happened about 10 years ago, when I was still a young graduate, seeking a bit of peace to write my first book. I rented a secluded cabin in the middle of a vast rural property, a few hours from the nearest city. The place was beautiful during the day, rolling green hills, the singing of birds. A paradise. But at night, oh, the night was different. In the first week, everything went well. Inspiration flowed, the silence was invigorating. But then the lights began. In the middle of the night, I would see a faint, almost spectral glow, flickering among the dense trees of the forest that surrounded the cabin. At first, I thought they were fireflies, but the intensity and color was strange, a bluish white that didn't seem natural. Curiosity to my misfortune got the better of me. On a full moon night, I decided to follow the light. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the woods. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the silence became. The only sound was my own footsteps and the distant croaking of some frog. After about 20 tense minutes of walking, I reached a clearing, and there was nothing. The light had vanished. A shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't cold, it was apprehension. A feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me in the shadows. I quickened my pace back to the cabin, my mind racing with rational explanations, maybe a reflection, a natural phenomenon, anything to ward off the growing sense of dread. But the lights returned, and they became more frequent, more daring. Sometimes they seemed to move quickly between the trees, as if they were playing with me. One night, the light appeared very close to my cabin window. I peered through the crack in the curtains and saw... I can't explain what it was. A shapeless form, vaguely humanoid, enveloped in that cold, pulsating light. Fear paralyzed me. I stood there, motionless, my heart pounding in my chest, until the light and the figure disappeared into the darkness. The next morning I packed my things and left. I never returned to that cabin. Even today, I shudder just remembering that light in the forgotten forest and the sinister presence that accompanied it. What was that thing? I will never know, and perhaps it's better that way. What did Lucas see that night? An illusion of an isolated mind? A supernatural manifestation? Or something much more earthly and dangerous lurking in the darkness of the forest? This is just the first of the stories that remind us that not everything that glitters in the countryside is beautiful and harmless. Continuation of the first story, English version, to reach approximately 4,000 words. The feeling of vulnerability that overwhelmed me in that isolated cabin permeated my days long after I had returned to the city. The constant noise of cars, the light from street lamps, the presence of other people on the streets. All of this, which used to irritate me, now seemed like a protective shield against the oppressive silence and the restless shadows of the countryside. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe I was tired, stressed with the book deadline, and my mind played tricks. But the sharpness of that bluish light and the shadowy form that accompanied it were too vivid to be mere hallucinations. And the feeling of pure terror, that chill that ran through every cell of my body, was something I had never experienced before and will never forget. After a few months, I spoke with an old resident of the region where the cabin was located. I mentioned the strange lights and the feeling of a presence in the forest. The old man looked at me with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. He told old stories, local legends about will-o'-the-wisps that lured travelers to their doom, and about apparitions of shadowy beings that wandered through the woods at night. He told me that that area in particular had a dark history, with reports of unexplained disappearances and tragic events that had occurred there many years ago. Some said that the land was cursed, that negative energies lingered over the forest, manifesting in strange and terrifying ways. Although I am a skeptical person by nature, the conversation with the old man disturbed me even more. The possibility of having witnessed something beyond my rational understanding was frightening, and the idea that other people might have had similar experiences in that isolated place sent an even greater chill down my spine. I never sought the peace of the countryside in the same way again. The natural beauty still enchants me, but now I always carry with me a hint of apprehension, a reminder of that sinister light in the forgotten forest, and the undeniable feeling that not all the mysteries of the countryside are harmless. Sometimes the silence hides horrors that the urban mind simply cannot conceive, and it is in these remote places, far from the eyes of civilization, that true terror can find a home. Solitude becomes an ally of fear, amplifying every shadow, every noise, transforming the familiar into something sinister and unknown. The experience in the cabin taught me a cruel lesson. Not every refuge is safe, and sometimes the peace we seek can lead us directly to our worst nightmares. The forest, with its immensity and impenetrable darkness, holds secrets that are best left buried, far from the light of reason and the safety of the city. And the light, that cold, bluish light, still haunts my nights, a constant reminder that there are mysteries in the world that defy any logical explanation, and that terror can reside in the most unexpected places. That encounter in the forest was not just an isolated event. It was a door open to a side of reality that I preferred not to know, a reminder that the darkness of the countryside can be much deeper and more threatening than any dark alley in the city. And even today, when night falls and the silence becomes denser, a hint of fear insists on whispering in my ears, reminding me of the curse of the abandoned house at the end of the road, or rather the sinister light in the forgotten forest. The second story takes us to a place where the silence is even more oppressive, a vast cornfield. My name is Sophia, and this experience happened during the summer of my teenage years, when I went to spend the holidays at my grandparents' farm. The farm was enormous, surrounded by miles and miles of cornfield. During the day, it was a green and golden labyrinth, full of life, with the buzzing of bees and the soft rustling of leaves. But at night, the cornfield turned into a nightmare, a realm of shadows and whispers where fear became palpable. At first, there were just strange noises, whispers in the wind, dry crackles, as if something was moving between the rows of corn. They seemed like whispers of distant voices, unintelligible but laden with a sinister intent. And there were the crackles, like bones breaking under an invisible weight, echoing in the silence of the night. But as the days passed, the sounds became more defined, more intentional. I started to hear a call, a deep and drawn-out sound, which seemed to come from the center of the cornfield, calling me by name. It wasn't a scream nor a whisper, but something in between, a guttural vibration that made the air tremble and my heart race. Fear began to settle in slowly, like a dense fog creeping across the ground, enveloping everything in its cold dampness. I avoided leaving the house at night, locked all the doors and windows, and prayed for the sun to rise soon. bringing back the safety of the day. But the call continued, louder and louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, whispering my name in my ears, etched into my mind. One night I couldn't take it anymore. Curiosity and terror mixed in an explosive combination, and I decided to investigate, even though I knew it could be the worst decision of my life. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the cornfield. The dim light of the flashlight barely penetrated the dense darkness, creating dancing shadows that seemed to move on their own. The tall, dry leaves rustled against me, creating a disturbing sound, a constant whisper that seemed to mock my courage. The air was heavy, filled with a sweet and sickening smell, like decaying flowers, which made my stomach churn and my head spin. And then the call came again, closer this time, clearer. "Sophia!" It was my voice, but distorted, guttural, as if it were coming from a monstrous creature, an aberration from a nightmare. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in the oppressive silence of the cornfield. The cornfield seemed to close in around me, as if it were alive, trying to swallow me into its green and dark mass. The paths became increasingly labyrinthine, and the feeling of being lost grew with every step. After a walk that seemed like an eternity, I reached a small clearing. And there it was. Something. A dark and shapeless form, tall and thin, standing in the middle of the corn. I couldn't make out any details, but I felt its eyes on me, eyes that glowed with a red and hungry light, like incandescent embers in the darkness. Terror paralyzed me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My muscles refused to obey the commands of my brain, and I was trapped there like a helpless prey before a predator. The creature began to approach, dragging its feet on the dry ground, emitting that horrible call that seemed to suck my soul. I thought I was going to die there, in that corn maze, swallowed by the darkness and madness, turned into another dark legend whispered by the locals. But then something strange happened. A strong wind blew, howling like a wild animal, and the corn leaves began to shake violently, creating a green and undulating sea. The creature seemed to hesitate, as if it were hearing something stronger than my fear. It looked up at the sky, as if it were responding to an even older and more powerful call. And then it disappeared. It simply vanished into the middle of the cornfield like a shadow dissolving into the darkness. I ran back to the farm without looking back, without stopping until I was safe inside the house. I locked the doors and windows, hid under the covers, and waited for the sun to rise, praying that the daylight would drive away the horrors of the night. I never told this story to anyone, afraid that they would think I was crazy, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I know that the cornfield for me will never be the same. The distant call still echoes in my nightmares, a constant reminder that terror can hide in the most common places, waiting to find us and remind us that not everything that the night hides should be discovered. The innocence of the countryside can be just a mask for ancestral horrors. The third and final story brings us to the encounter with a solitary and mysterious figure, and a sound that echoes in the darkness of the night, chilling to the bone. My name is Daniel, and this story was told to me by my grandfather, a man of few words, but who kept in his memory terrifying tales of the countryside. He grew up in a small rural village, surrounded by vast expanses of land and dense forests, where ancient legends and ancestral fears still found a home. The village was an isolated place, far from the city lights and the comforts of modernity. The houses were simple, made of wood and stone, and life was governed by the cycles of nature. But this apparent tranquility hid dark secrets, stories of apparitions, strange creatures, and macabre rituals that were whispered by the elders around the campfire. In the heart of this village lived a lonely old woman, known only as the Lady of the Hill. She lived in a secluded cabin, on top of a steep hill, far from the other houses and the protection of the community. The cabin was small and dark, with foggy windows and a moss-covered roof. The Lady of the Hill was rarely seen, and when she appeared, she frightened the children with her piercing gaze and her hunched figure. The villagers whispered about her, saying that she was a witch, a sorceress who communicated with hidden forces and who cast curses on those who displeased her. They said she knew the secrets of poisonous herbs and forbidden rituals, and that she could control the elements of nature with her black magic. My grandfather, however, never believed these rumors. He saw the Lady of the Hill as a sad and lonely woman who had withdrawn from the world for reasons that no one knew. He thought she was just a lost soul, haunted by a tragic past and misunderstood by the community. But there was something that even my grandfather feared: the howl in the night. On full moon nights, when silence hung over the village, a terrifying sound echoed through the hills. It was a long and piercing howl, which made the village dogs hide under the beds and the residents lock their doors even tighter. The howl seemed to come from all directions at once, echoing in the depths of the forest and reverberating on the slopes of the hills. Some said it was the howl of a werewolf, a cursed creature that roamed the region in search of victims. They told stories of people who had been attacked and mutilated by this beast, and whose howls echoed in the night as a harbinger of death. Others believed it was the lament of an evil spirit trapped between this world and the next. They said it was the ghost of a woman who had been brutally murdered in the forest, and that her howl was a cry of revenge that had haunted the village for centuries. My grandfather, however, had his own theory. He believed that the howl was the call of an ancient creature, something that existed long before werewolves and ghosts, something that fed on fear and darkness. One night, curiosity got the better of him. He was young and brave and wanted to unravel the mystery of the howl. He grabbed his shotgun and climbed the hill towards the Lady of the Hill's cabin. The path was steep and rocky, and the darkness was almost impenetrable. The trees bent over him, forming a dark tunnel that seemed to swallow him. The wind howled through the branches, whispering strange and threatening words, but he kept climbing, guided by the howl that became louder and closer. The sound seemed to call him, to draw him into the depths of the darkness, promising him answers and revealing forbidden secrets. When he finally reached the cabin, he saw something he would never forget. The door was ajar, and a dim light shone inside, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. The howl came from inside the cabin, muffled but still terrifying. My grandfather approached cautiously, shotgun in hand, and peered through the crack in the door. What he saw left him paralyzed with horror, etched in his mind like an indelible scar. The Lady of the Hill was in the center of the room, standing before a lit fireplace. But she was not alone. There were other figures in the room, dark and shapeless shadows that moved around her in a macabre ritual. They were animals, or at least they looked like animals, but their eyes glowed with an evil intelligence, and their movements were strange and unnatural. Their bodies writhed and twisted as if they were possessed by a supernatural force. The Lady of the Hill raised her arms and began to chant in a strange and guttural language. The words were like knives, cutting through the silence and making the air vibrate with a sinister energy. And then the howl began. It came from the old woman's throat, but it was not a human sound. It was a bestial, savage, and terrifying howl, which made the blood run cold in his veins and his soul tremble with dread. It was the sound of evil in its purest and most visceral form, echoing in the darkness of the countryside and announcing the arrival of unimaginable horrors. My grandfather fled the cabin as fast as he could without looking back. He ran down the hill, stumbling over rocks and branches, the howl echoing in his ears like a curse. He never told anyone what he saw that night, for fear of being taken for crazy and locked in an asylum, but he knew the truth. The Lady of the Hill was not a lonely woman. She was something much worse, a portal to a world of darkness and nightmares. And the howl in the night was not the lament of a spirit, nor the call of a werewolf. It was the voice of evil, echoing in the darkness of the countryside and forever scarring the souls of those who heard it. From that night on, my grandfather was never the same. He became a taciturn and frightened man, haunted by the memories of that terrible night and tormented by the fear that evil could return at any moment.